Namaskar and welcome to Kahali on what has been a very somber day after the tragedy that took place yesterday. We are back today to discuss exactly what is happening on the ground, what are the updates, and what's coming off the tragedy that took place yesterday. Of course, the mortal remains of General Rawat, along with his wife and the other personnel, army personnel, who were on board with him on that ill fated chopper, are on their way to New Delhi. They are expected to arrive at about 8 p.m., which is approximately an hour and 15 minutes from now. It has been announced that General Rawat will receive a full state honors for his final rites, and of course receive a send off that is befitting of somebody who has dedicated their life to patriotic duty and has really sacrificed their life in um, in the service of the nation. And that's really where we're at right now. We're waiting for his mortal remains to arrive. In the past 24 hours, of course, there has been a lot of commentary, which is something that we should now be used to when it comes to these situations. Unfortunately, I come from the mindset that Twitter, social media has democratized the discourse to a large extent, and that was necessary and it was required because for the longest time there was a one way conversation that was going on, wherein those in power, those with access to the media, to platforms, were talking down to us, the people of this country, and that was mostly welcome. But subsequently, what one has seen is the evolvement of these social media platforms into really monsters. And I'm not using that term lightly. I'm saying this with a lot of intent and with a lot of observation of what has been going on in the last 24 hours. And Sanathan, you're absolutely right. Uh, this is really what has triggered this live for me, is the fact that some people are so despicable, and there's no other word to describe them. They're so despicable, so consumed by hate, that even at a time like this, they find it in their moral consciousness to think it's okay to speak ill of the dead, especially to speak ill of someone who died in uniform, because their political leanings are such that anyone who is associated with this establishment in any capacity is not worthy of any sort of humane treatment. They are de recognized as human beings if they are in some way associated with the ruling establishment. And this is really the tragedy, the tragedy of our times, is that we have lost the simple human decency to remember, to commemorate a fallen soldier who has dedicated more than 4 decades of his life in the service of the nation, in patriotic duty, because there may be some political differences that we have with the establishment. And I think this has been really the most tragic outcome of the discourse that we have seen in the last 24 hours. Anand Ranganathan, who is very active on social media, said that we should not necessarily speak of these people or threaten them with any kind of action based on what they've been saying. And he has a point there, because the moment you kind of threaten people, you make victims out of really people who are despicable human beings by saying that, yes, I mean, they have their free speech and poor them for saying these nasty, horrible things. But on the other hand, I think that we must encounter, and I use this word encounter, we must do a surgical strike on this sort of mindset, this mindset that is so anti Modi that it becomes anti India. And it becomes anti India to the extent that they are quite comfortable with raining down abuses on a man who has died in uniform, the highest military officer in this country. It's absolutely disgusting. I agree with you, Preeti. They are disgusting. And there is no other way to describe the kind of commentary that has come forward, the sort of glee that these people have displayed so shamelessly. I mean, it's unbelievable. Are these the values that we've been raised with? Is this what we've come to? Because you do not like Modi, that's the only reason that you would do something like this? That you would forget that this is a man who has served the nation for over 4 decades? Forget that this is a father who has two young daughters. Does he deserve this? How do you frankly reconcile this vitriol with your everyday life? Do you type out an abuse for him and then go back to your child, to your mother, to your spouse, to your everyday life after literally, figuratively, digitally spitting on the dead? I don't understand what people have come to. I don't understand how they are able to reconcile this behavior with being human beings. And it's really, really got to me. It's really got to me. And I don't want to talk about anything negative as we await the general's mortal remains in the capital, along with the others who gave up their life with him, who are victims of this terrible tragedy. I don't want to make it about them, but I've been watching this since yesterday. I've been watching this since yesterday, and one after the other. I mean, former officers. Okay, we've reached a point where we don't expect politicians and political stooges to know any better. उनके मन में जो आता है वो बोल देते हैं, और इसलिए बोलते हैं क्योंकि कभी कभी मीडिया हो या सोशल मीडिया हो, उसके माध्यम से उनको थोड़ा बहुत अटेंशन मिलता है. They get a little bit of the spotlight on them, you know, and they can leverage that for whatever purpose they have. So one doesn't really talk about those people. But the thing that I found most bothersome was the fact that former people who donned the olive greens, who were part of the forces, have come forward and said such horrible things. One person posted a photograph of some cake. A person who's a defense analyst, his name is Ajay Shukla, posted a cake and said yummy last evening. And it's been deleted since then. Whatever, better sense prevailed, or the outrage that it created on social media was enough for him to kind of withdraw that negative comment, or whatever, that insensitive comment. But I mean, one just has to wonder, these are grown up people. These are people who've served in the forces. Yes, I admit to the fact that people who are in the line of duty, who face death front face every day, have a certain practical take on losing one's life, because they see their comrades in arms go down so often during operations, during any kind of confrontation that they have with the enemy side. It could be the Pakistan army, it could be terrorists. They're used to, or they are conditioned to respond in a certain way to the loss of life. But let's be clear, even if we give them that allowance for being former army people who are conditioned by their training and their exposure to be able to adjust to loss of life and death, this was a situation where the number one military officer in the country lost his life, not in a conflict zone, but in a tragic accident. Unexpected, unprecedented. The last time the higher echelons of the military were impacted by an accident like this was back in the 1950s. So you're talking nearly 60 plus years before the Indian state and the Indian people had to encounter this kind of a loss. So this is unprecedented in many ways, because for most of us in living memory, we have not encountered a situation like this, where someone that important to the national security and the national security apparatus of this country was lost in this senseless way. Now, that being the circumstances, how could these people in uniform make the kind of comments that they made? And that's really what brings me back to the level of toxicity that exists in our society, on social media. And I don't want to say society, because, I'm sure you all have had this experience when you go out in public and you interact with everyday people, normal people who are not connected with this world of social media or politics. And, you discuss issues with them and the latest outrage on social media, and they'll turn around and say, oh, but I haven't been tracking that, or I've not heard of that, or who is this person? This person who is this big trigger point on social media, who we all discuss, and the outside world has never heard of them. And then you realize that, what is the purpose of social media? Is it important to even be on there? Is it important to even kind of be there and to engage and try to say that this is democratization, this is an equalizer, this is the way to engage with each other, to understand each other, to build dialogue? Is there even any point to this, when such sort of despicable commentary by people who we have been raised? And I am like you are, an ordinary middle class Indian, raised with the basic values of patriotism, not with any great values of patriotism. It was not spoon fed to me every night, but the basic values of patriotism and appreciation for our armed forces, for the freedoms that we enjoy, not exceptional in any way. When we have to encounter this vitriol, this toxicity online, is it worth it even to be on these platforms? And you're right, someone said, I can feel the pain in your voice, is because it pains me deeply. It pains me deeply to see this level of division, to see people who have bylines in the big newspapers of this country, who write articles and sign their names at the bottom of those articles, speaking of issues of national importance, come online and make comments that are so disrespectful, so inhumane, that I really wonder that is it even worth it to be on these platforms? And you're right. I mean, Abhishek is saying, Advaita, should we really think about it hypothetically? We are in a war, these people celebrating, whose side will this? You know, is there anything more tragic than to be at war than your own people? It's okay to be at war with people who are outside of your frame of reference, who belong to another country, who belong to another region, documented and historical issues to deal with. But to be at war with your own people? Should we not, every one of us, be able to take for granted the fact that as Indians, when someone like this falls, we can feel and experience that pain? And if we don't feel and experience that pain, we at least have the common decency to refrain from commenting in a negative manner about it. Can we not at least reach that sense of agreement, of understanding as compatriots? Forget human beings, as people who swear by this constitution, who live on this land, who call this their karma bhumi, their matra bhumi. Just on the basis of that, can we not have this sense of understanding? For me, the complete breakdown of that basic sense of understanding of what it means to be Indian to belong to this land has been lost in these last 24 hours. We're not talking about a politician, although I think it's equally despicable when people comment on politicians, but that's fine. I mean, politicians have positions, they do things, they take advantage of opportunities in a way that most of us would not understand or condone. That happens, okay? That happens. But somebody who has spent their life serving the nation in this selfless way is subjected to this kind of vitriol by people, not by the troll, not by the egghead on social media, not by the anonymous person on social media, but by people, like I've told you, people who sit in parliament, people who write their names at the end of important editorials in national newspapers, people who have donned the olive green and claim to have served the country and know what it's like to be on the front line. People like that have spoken in this way. And that is what bothers me. I would even forgive the political person and the stooge, because that's it. That's the bread and butter. That's the line. That's the discourse. They've called the army thugs on the street. They've used all kinds of pejoratives for the army in discourse in the last couple of years. So that I'm not even looking at that. I'm thinking about these other people, these sensible or these people of civil society who claim to have served the nation, to know better, to have the best interests of the nation at heart, to come forward and speak like this, even before the mortal remains have reached New Delhi. And to me, that is really the tragedy of where we find ourselves. And there will be people who will shut you down. There will be people who will turn around and say, oh, this is jingoism, this is the kind of articulation that has made this country majoritarian and Hindu nationalist, etc., etc. I'm sorry, shut up. This is human decency. That's what it is. It's basic, common human decency. Don't give it any intellectual spin. Don't give it any words of it is this, it is that, it reflects this churn in society, it reflects this turn of the narrative, it reflects this political viewpoint. Sorry. It is human decency that even before the mortal remains of a brave have been consigned to the holy flames, that you turn around and you have the gumption to air your despicable barrage of vitriol, to inflict it on the decent people of this nation. That is the problem. And no amount of intellectualizing this, narrative spinning this, is going to change it. And it's time that people like you and me became angry about this and spoke about this in this way, because that is the only way it'll shut them down. Or even if it doesn't, that is the only way to indicate to them that they are the pariahs of society. The people who speak like this, they are the pariahs of any society, not just this society, but any society. I hope you all understand where I'm coming from. I'm going through your comments, and I know that most of you get what I'm saying and how upsetting this is for all of us. It's a dark, dark day. It's a dark day in any nation's life experience. It could be any country. When someone of this magnitude loses their life in this way, it is a dark day for any country. I hope you will join me in prayer as we wish for the best for our nation going forward, as we wish for the strength to his family, for strength for all those who lost their lives, officers, army personnel, Air Force personnel. I hope that you will pray for their soul. I don't really have much to say. I think the next day, tomorrow, today, these are going to be good from everything right now seems to be a countdown to the mortal remains arriving in Delhi and then subsequently being consigned to the holy flames. It's a very difficult time for this nation, and it's heartbreaking. It's frankly heartbreaking. I I can't say for anything else. And really, yes, Sanatan, absolutely pray for Group Captain Varun, and we pray for his health. He escaped death last year, not very long ago. He was on a flight, and I think the air pressure fell, and he survived that. So he's survived one life-threatening situation, and now he's on life support. So one can only hope that he survives this as well. But I just really wanted to say, I wanted to come on and really just talk to you all and just say that please understand that there is no substitute for human decency. And anybody who compromises that sense of human decency, we're not perfect. We're human beings. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. We make bad choices. That's part of being human. Nobody's perfect. But when you consciously derive pleasure from such grave misfortune, then you're not even a human being. And if you're not a human being, then you're not allowed the frailties, the fragilities, the weaknesses of being human and of being mistake. So make no mistake. Make no mistake. These comments that were in the public domain are well calibrated, well thought out, come from a position of absolute belief, a belief that transcends human decency. Make no mistake, that's where it comes from. And be sure in your own way to identify it, to point it out, and to counter it in whatever way you can, because this is how we preserve human decency. I don't care about the politics of it or any of it, but if we have to preserve human decency, we have to counter this every step of the way. I thank you all for joining me at this point. Again, I my prayers are there for those who lost their lives in this unfortunate way. We will come back and talk more about what we need to talk about if required. But really, at this point of time, I just want you all to shine a light on these people. They want the spotlight. Give them the spotlight. Expose them for the wretched human beings that they are. That's my only appeal. Thank you for watching.